What happens when two of late-night television's biggest personalities clash in front of a live studio audience? What you're about to hear is the shocking account of how a routine guest appearance turned into one of the most explosive confrontations in television history. The night Jimmy Kimmel went too far, and Conan O'Brien fought back in a way that nobody saw coming. Before we dive into this incredible story, make sure to hit that subscribe button and let me know in the comments what you think really went down that night. The tension had been building for weeks behind the scenes. Sources close to both shows had been whispering about growing animosity between the two hosts, stemming from a series of professional disagreements that had escalated beyond mere rivalry. When Conan agreed to appear on Jimmy Kimmel Live as a guest, most people assumed it would be the typical friendly banter between comedy colleagues. They couldn't have been more wrong. The evening started normally enough. Conan arrived at the studio in good spirits, greeting crew members with his characteristic warmth and humor. He had prepared several anecdotes about his recent projects, expecting the usual promotional interview format. What he didn't know was that Jimmy had spent the afternoon reviewing a carefully prepared list of provocative questions designed not to entertain the audience, but to embarrass his guest. As the show began, Jimmy's opening monologue contained several thinly veiled jabs at Conan's career trajectory, jokes that the studio audience laughed at, but struck many observers as unnecessarily mean-spirited. When it came time to introduce his guest, Jimmy's smile seemed forced, his usual enthusiasm replaced by something that felt more calculating. Conan walked out to thunderous applause, waving to the crowd with genuine appreciation. He settled into the guest chair, adjusting his suit jacket with the practiced ease of someone who had done this thousands of times before. The first few minutes proceeded as expected, with light conversation about current projects and shared memories from their early days in comedy. But then Jimmy's tone shifted. His questions became more pointed, more personal. He brought up Conan's well-documented struggles during the Tonight Show transition, framing them in a way that suggested failure rather than the complex network politics that had actually been at play. The studio audience grew noticeably quieter as the conversation took this uncomfortable turn. Conan initially tried to deflect with humor, as was his nature. He made self-deprecating jokes and attempted to steer the conversation back to lighter territory. But Jimmy persisted, pushing harder with each follow-up question. He mentioned ratings. He brought up canceled projects. He even made references to personal matters that had no place in a late-night interview. The breaking point came when Jimmy decided to play a clip package that his producers had prepared. Without warning Conan, he introduced a montage of what he called greatest misses, a compilation of moments from Conan's career taken completely out of context and edited to make him look foolish. The audience watched in stunned silence as legitimate comedy moments were twisted into something humiliating. Conan's face changed as the clip played. The good-natured smile disappeared, replaced by something harder, more serious. When the lights came back up, he was no longer the jovial guest who had walked out 10 minutes earlier. The transformation was visible to everyone in the studio, and the atmosphere became electric with tension. Jimmy seemed pleased with himself, grinning as he turned back to his guest. But when he opened his mouth to make another joke at Conan's expense, he was met with a stare that stopped him cold. Conan leaned forward in his chair, his voice dropping to a level that somehow carried more authority than any shout could have. The audience sensed that something significant was about to happen. Phones began emerging from pockets as people realized they might be witnessing television history. The camera operators instinctively tightened their shots, recognizing the dramatic potential of the moment. Even the band members stopped their usual between-segment chatter, focusing entirely on the two men at center stage. What happened next would be replayed on social media for weeks, dissected by entertainment journalists, and remembered as one of the most genuine moments of conflict ever broadcast on late-night television. Conan O'Brien, known for his quick wit and generally pleasant demeanor, was about to show a side of himself that few people had ever seen. Conan's voice cut through the studio with surgical precision. "Jimmy, I need to ask you something." The words carried a weight that immediately silenced any remaining murmurs from the audience. "Do you think that was funny? Do you genuinely believe that what you just showed represents who I am as a performer?" Jimmy's confident expression faltered. He had expected pushback, perhaps even some heated banter that would make for good television. What he hadn't anticipated was this level of controlled intensity. Conan wasn't raising his voice or making a scene. Instead, he was dismantling the entire premise of the interview with quiet, devastating effectiveness. "I mean, come on, Conan." "It's just comedy," Jimmy replied, but his voice lacked conviction. He glanced toward his desk as if looking for his notes might somehow restore his confidence. "We're just having fun here." "Fun?" Conan repeated, his eyebrows raising in that distinctive way that anyone familiar with his work would recognize as a danger sign. "Jimmy, I've been doing this for over 3 decades. I understand comedy. What I don't understand is why you would invite me onto your show specifically to humiliate me in front of your audience." The studio had become completely silent. This wasn't the manufactured drama of reality television or the scripted conflict of wrestling. This was 2 seasoned professionals having a very real disagreement, and everyone present could feel the authenticity of the moment. Jimmy tried to regain control of the situation. "Look, we've all had our share of ups and downs in this business. I thought we could laugh about it together." But even as he spoke, he seemed to realize how hollow his justification sounded. "Laugh about what, exactly?" Conan pressed. "About the fact that network executives made promises they couldn't keep? About the fact that I chose to maintain my integrity rather than compromise my values? About the fact that I've continued to create content that I'm proud of, regardless of which network logo appears in the corner of the screen?" Each question hit its mark with devastating accuracy. Jimmy's attempts to interject were met with polite, but firm redirections as Conan continued his methodical breakdown of the evening's events. "Here's what I find most interesting about tonight," Conan continued, his tone remaining conversational despite the intensity of his words. "You had an opportunity to have a genuine conversation with someone who has been in this industry as long as you have. We could have talked about the challenges of live television, the evolution of comedy, the ways that late night has changed over the years. Instead, you chose to try to score points at my expense. The camera operators were getting shots that would become iconic." Jimmy's discomfort was palpable, his usual quick wit seemingly abandoned. He fidgeted with his papers, straightened his tie, and made several attempts to steer the conversation back to safer territory. "I think you're being a little sensitive here," Jimmy said, immediately realizing he had made a mistake. The words hung in the air like a challenge. Conan's laugh was sharp and humorless. "Sensitive? Jimmy, I've been roasted by everyone from Don Rickles to Triumph, the insult comic dog. I've had my career dissected by media critics and internet commentators. I'm not sensitive about comedy. I'm concerned about character." "What's that supposed to mean?" Jimmy asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer wouldn't be flattering. "It means that there's a difference between punching up and punching down. There's a difference between clever observation and cheap shots. And there's a difference between being a comedian and being a bully." The final word landed with particular force, causing several audience members to audibly gasp. Jimmy's face flushed red. "I'm not a bully," he protested. "I'm just doing my job." "Your job is to entertain people," Conan replied immediately. "Your job is to make them laugh, to give them a break from whatever difficulties they might be facing in their daily lives. Your job is not to tear down other people for your own benefit." The exchange had reached a point where it was clear that this was no longer just about the evening's interview. This was about fundamental differences in how the 2 men approached their craft and their responsibilities as public figures. Jimmy made one final attempt to regain control. "Look, maybe we should just move on to your next project." But Conan was no longer interested in following the traditional script of a late-night interview. No, Jimmy, I don't think we should move on. I think we should address what just happened here. You made a choice tonight, and I want your audience to understand what that choice reveals about your character. The challenge in his voice was unmistakable, and it was becoming clear that Jimmy was completely unprepared for this level of confrontation. Jimmy's composure finally cracked completely. You know what, Conan? Maybe you're right. Maybe I did go too far tonight. But let's not pretend you're some innocent victim here. You've made your share of jokes at other people's expense over the years. Absolutely, Conan agreed, his willingness to acknowledge this seeming to catch Jimmy off guard. I have made jokes about people and I've made mistakes. The difference is that when I realized I had hurt someone, I apologized. When I recognized that a joke had gone too far, I took responsibility for it. Can you say the same? The question hung in the air, and Jimmy's silence was answer enough. The studio audience was completely captivated, understanding that they were witnessing something unprecedented in the usually controlled world of late-night television. Here's what I want your viewers to understand, Conan said, turning slightly to address the camera directly. Comedy is supposed to bring people together. It's supposed to help us find common ground, to help us laugh at the absurdities of life. When it becomes a weapon, when it becomes a way to diminish others for personal gain, it stops being comedy and becomes something much darker. Jimmy attempted to interrupt, but Conan continued with the kind of passionate intensity that had made him a beloved figure in comedy. I've spent my entire career trying to make people laugh without making them feel bad about themselves. I've tried to find humor in situations without targeting individuals who didn't ask to be part of the joke. Tonight, you showed me that we have fundamentally different approaches to this art form. The camera captured Jimmy's face as these words hit home. His usual confidence had evaporated, replaced by something that looked almost like shame. He glanced toward his producers off stage, but found no help there. I want to thank your audience for their attention tonight, Conan said, standing up from his chair. They deserved better than what they got, and I hope they'll remember that comedy should lift people up, not tear them down. Jimmy finally found his voice again. Conan, sit down. We're not finished here. Actually, Jimmy, we are. Conan's response was calm but final. I came here tonight expecting to have a conversation between colleagues. Instead, I found myself in the middle of an ambush. I won't be part of that kind of entertainment. The studio erupted in scattered applause as Conan began to remove his microphone. Jimmy's face cycled through a range of emotions: confusion, anger, embarrassment, and something that might have been regret. You can't just walk off my show, Jimmy said, his voice rising for the first time all evening. Conan paused at the edge of the stage and turned back toward his host. Jimmy, I've been in this business long enough to know that respect is earned, not given. Tonight, you showed me exactly who you are. I'm simply choosing not to enable it. With that, Conan O'Brien walked off the Jimmy Kimmel live set, leaving behind a stunned studio audience and a host who suddenly realized that his attempt to embarrass a colleague had backfired spectacularly. The remaining minutes of the show were filled with awkward attempts at damage control, but the damage had already been done. The footage of the confrontation would be analyzed and reanalyzed for days afterward. Comedy experts would debate whether Conan had overreacted or whether Jimmy had truly crossed a line. Social media would explode with takes both hot and cold about the incident. But for those who were there that night, who witnessed the raw authenticity of two professionals dealing with a genuine conflict, the memory would remain crystal clear. They had watched as one man's attempt to score easy laughs at another's expense had been met with a masterclass in dignity and principled response. The night had started as a routine late-night interview and ended as a defining moment that would be remembered long after both men had moved on to other projects. It was a reminder that even in the scripted world of television, real human moments can break through, and when they do, they reveal truths that no amount of preparation can hide. What did you think about Conan's response to Jimmy's behavior that night? Was he justified in walking off the set, or should he have handled it differently? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this one.